Hello and welcome back to The Independent Pianist. I'm your host, Cole Anderson, and today I have a lovely shorter work by Fanny Mendelssohn for you. This is the second piece from the Three Melodies Opus 4, so three melodies for the piano solo. In essence, it's analogous to what her brother had already published under the title of Songs Without Words, the same sort of idea. This piece, the Opus 4 number 2, Melodie, comes from the year before Fanny's death, 1846, sometimes referred to as her annus mirabilis, or her miraculous year. This was when she wrote many of her greatest works, over 50 compositions that she wrote at this time. And this was also the year that she started publishing works under her own name. A few of her songs had been published previously under her brother's name, but in 1846, she published her first set of Lieder and also her first set of piano pieces. And this collection, Opus 4, was published the following year, the year that she died, 1847. By the way, it's only the second piece from this collection that was actually composed in 1846. The other two pieces were earlier works that she brought together with this piece for publication. The first piece, Allegro Assai in A-flat major, that was actually written in 1839, and the final piece, another faster movement, was written in 1840. So they do hang together quite well, played as a set, but you can certainly excerpt them and play them separately. That probably would have been expected. I don't really want to talk too much about the music itself, since it is such a marvelously beautiful and expressive piece. It really doesn't require much introduction. It really speaks right to the heart, and it's besides very, very short and very direct. However, I'll mention a few interesting things about the music. First off, of course, is the style of piano writing that Fanny Mendelssohn uses. It's a style of writing also much utilized by her brother, in which she creates kind of a gentle effect of three hands by dividing the accompaniment between left and right hands. Here, or at the very beginning of the piece, the 16th notes that appear in the lower staff and also in the upper staff, they're meant to be divided between left and right hands. They together form the accompaniment. The left hand is also, though, taking the bass line, while the right hand plays the entire melody. So this means that often enough you have to be playing both melody and accompaniment at the same time in the right hand. And this introduces a certain amount of technical difficulty because you need to balance the sound so that you really hear the melody as standing out very clearly. And the 16th notes can never interfere with that. So it's easier said than done. This sort of texture sounds very transparent and very rich and warm, but it's really quite tricky to execute. It's not at all simple. That's part of the reason why people tend to underestimate pieces like these, pieces by Fanny Mendelssohn and also the Songs Without Words by her brother. They tend to be mistakenly thought of as being very, very easy, but actually they require a great deal of practice and careful listening to balance all the voices correctly and to make sure that the sound is just right. It's the intricacy of this texture that really makes it quite challenging. And you can even see, if you watch me play the opening phrase of this piece, you can see how the left hand is constantly having to move back and forth very smoothly in a very relaxed way in order to cover the bass and also contribute to the accompaniment. So it has this very lovely, very limpid kind of sound, but in reality, you're having to work pretty hard to produce this incredibly beautiful and transparent sound. So much for that. The edition that I'm using here is the first edition. This is available on IMSLP. It's the first edition published in Berlin by Schlesinger. And there are some interesting things about the notation, I think, in this first edition, and particularly as regards pedaling. So there is this idea among people who are in favor of kind of a historically informed method of performing works from the past, that the idea of syncopated pedaling was not really in use in the 19th century. This idea comes about because if you look at scores, say looking at a page from a Chopin nocturne published around the same time in the 1830s or so, well, you can see here that the pedal markings align with the beats and that the release of the pedal markings, so in this score, it's that little circle with the cross through it, that shows where you're supposed to lift the pedal. Those come always before the beat. That, of course, creates a little bit of a gap in the sound of the pedal, a little bit of an articulation in the sound when you do that. And in the modern era, in the 20th century and into the 21st century, pianists almost always pedal in quite a different way. We pedal in a way where we overlap the pedaling, where we delay the release until the next beat, until the next strong beat. So instead of releasing on that last eighth note, we would release very quickly after playing the first eighth note of the third beat or the downbeat, and then put the pedal down immediately afterwards. This creates a very teeny momentary overlap in the sound, and that makes it sound very connected and legato. So as I was saying, there is this idea that that's not the way people pedaled yet in the 19th century, simply because of the way the music was notated. But I think that Fanny's score for this melody shows us that that is quite wrong, in fact, because you can see that she evidently had the publisher very carefully put the release sign, the little star, on the downbeat each time, and the retake for the pedal slightly afterwards. So it's evident that by 1846, at least, Fanny Mendelssohn was quite aware of this technique of pedaling, and in fact was notating it. I am firmly of the belief that Chopin and Liszt and Schumann and so forth all would have been aware of this method of pedaling, and I am 99.9% sure that the notational variant that we see in many of those scores was simply a matter of how people were notating it, not how they were actually doing it. It kind of makes sense psychologically to show the pedaling lining up with the beat, even though technically speaking, you're really changing the pedal slightly after the beat. But a few brave souls were already trying to show more precisely exactly how that pedaling should work from a pedagogical standpoint. And the pedalings that Fanny gives are quite striking. As was common for many composers of that era, she sometimes makes use of very long pedalings. Pedalings that would seem to be too dissonant or that would have too much resonance developing for use on a modern piano by modern standards of cleanliness. But I think that if you handle them correctly, you really can get a very beautiful sound. It's certainly true that these pedalings probably would have been easier to interpret on a piano from the 1840s, but many of them will still work. You may have to make use of some half or three-quarter pedalings in order to make some of them work, but they can be extremely beautiful. Take, for instance, the very last pedaling that she gives for the last two bars. This is something which is a little bit daring by modern standards because you have several steps in a row in the melody. You have the E, F sharp, G sharp, and then also the neighbor tones, C sharp, B sharp, C sharp. That creates quite a lot of dissonance when you hold the pedal down all the way through that final bar. But the effect is so beautiful and haunting that I can't imagine doing it any other way. I think most pianists nowadays would probably change the pedal on that last note, but that really would eliminate a lot of the magic of this passage. Yeah, it's really beautiful when you get all those overtones just kind of mixing together. The sound just seems to kind of waft through the air. It's really magical. Very much a prototype for the sort of piano writing that we would see in the early part of the 20th century with the French Impressionists and with the Russian Romantic School. So that's about it, really. This is a very small little gem of a piano piece. There's not much that needs to be said. I'll let the music speak for itself. So I do encourage you to check out the Hensel Pushers website, henselpushers.org. You can find links to all of Fanny Mendelssohn's piano music there. This particular opus is on IMSLP, but there are many other scores which are not available on IMSLP, but which you can only find on henselpushers.org. So check that out. It's a wonderful website, a wonderful resource. I'll be bringing you some more of Fanny's music in the near future, as well as some of her larger works, like the G minor piano sonata. But for now, I'll sign off and see you next week for some more music and conversation. So take care until then.